Your nucleus accumbens, the dopamine trigger buried deep in the center of your skull, fires the exact same neural burst when a phone notification hits your lock screen as when a slot machine lands 3 sevens. Not similar. Identical. The same electrochemical spike, the same prediction error, the same switch. A brainfacts.org analysis found that smartphone design features deliberately hijack the brain's reward and attention systems, producing behavioral addiction and measurable prefrontal cortex impairment, not metaphorical impairment. Structural. The heaviest phone users scored 5 to 10% higher on clinical tests for attention deficit disorder and showed diminished activity in the right prefrontal cortex, the region that governs self-control. Your phone is not a distraction, it is a conditioning device. And the mechanism it exploits is older than language, older than fire, older than the human species itself. But the most disturbing part is not the switch. It is what happens to your brain after the switch has been flipped 10,000 times, and why the system was engineered to ensure you can never feel satisfied. Here is what your brain is doing right now, this second, without your permission. Deep inside your midbrain, a cluster of dopamine neurons is running a continuous calculation, not about pleasure, about prediction. Every experience you have, every notification you receive, every red badge on an app icon, your brain compares what it expected to happen against what actually happened. The gap between those two values produces a signal. Neuroscientists call it a reward prediction error. A landmark study published in PNAS, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, established that phasic activity of midbrain dopamine neurons encodes this reward prediction error. It guides learning throughout the frontal cortex and the basal ganglia, your brain's habit formation centers. The dopamine signal does not tell you something feels good. It tells you your estimate of reality was wrong. It flags the surprise. Think about that. Dopamine is not the pleasure molecule, it is the surprise molecule, the error signal, the chemical that screams, pay attention, something unexpected just happened, update your model of the world. And this is where your phone becomes a weapon. A Harvard brain analysis revealed that social media algorithms manipulate reward timing to produce continuous dopamine release. The mechanism: reward uncertainty. The unpredictability of when a like arrives, which video the algorithm serves next. Whether the notification is a message or just a reminder, that uncertainty magnifies dopaminergic activity. The bigger the surprise, the bigger the spike. This is not a design accident. This is a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the same reward pattern used in slot machines. In pathological gamblers, researchers at brainfacts.org found that uncertainty drives bigger dopamine spikes than the money itself. The anticipation becomes more enjoyable than the reward. You are not scrolling for content. You are scrolling for the chance of content, the possibility, the maybe. But there is a problem with that neural mapping, because your dopamine system was designed to learn, to adapt, to recalibrate. And what happens when you give a learning system the same surprising stimulus 2,500 times a day? Neurocity's analysis of reward prediction error describes it precisely. The dopamine system is a surprise detector, not a reward detector, computing the difference between predicted and actual outcomes, and over time tolerance develops. The brain recalibrates upward, predicting larger rewards, requiring more stimulation to generate the same learning signal. Your brain adapts. The surprise wears off, and you need more. Here is where the fracture begins. On average, phone users amass over 2,500 touches per day, 145 minutes of daily usage time. That statistic comes from a study cited by the Harvard Brain: 2,500 touches, each one triggering a microcalculation in your midbrain. Was that worth it? Was that better than expected? Should I do it again? And every single time the answer is ambiguous. Every time the scroll reveals something almost interesting, almost satisfying, your dopamine system fires again. Not because you got what you wanted, because you didn't. The prediction error stays open, the loop stays active. Buzz notifications act as cues for reward by arriving at unpredictable times, producing positive dopamine efflux and habitual checking behavior, not conscious checking. Habitual, automated. Your hand reaches for the phone before you decide to reach for the phone. The compulsion loop has already executed below the threshold of awareness. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for conscious choice, is being bypassed. A review published by the National Institutes of Health stated it without ambiguity. Drugs of addiction generate, hijack, and amplify the dopamine reward signal, inducing exaggerated, uncontrolled dopamine effects on neuronal plasticity. The drug effect mimics a positive reward prediction error because it is never compared against a prediction, it just hits, raw, unfiltered, and induces continuing strong dopamine stimulation. Your phone does something terrifyingly similar. Every infinite scroll, every autoplay video, every batched notification delivers a dopamine signal that bypasses your brain's comparison mechanism. The reward is never predicted accurately because the algorithm deliberately varies what it serves. The system is designed to keep the prediction error permanently open, and this is where most people make the critical mistake. They believe dopamine is making them happy. It is not. It is making them want more scrolling, want more notifications, want more content. The wanting chemical, not the pleasure chemical. You are chasing satisfaction through a mechanism that is architecturally incapable of delivering it. But even that is not the cruelest part. Because there is a biological consequence nobody talks about, something happening inside the skulls of an entire generation right now, and it may not be fully reversible. Your brain has a failsafe. When any system floods with too much of a single neurotransmitter, the receptors begin to downregulate. They pull back, become less sensitive. It is a survival mechanism, the brain protecting itself from overstimulation. But in the context of chronic phone use, this failsafe becomes a trap. Momentous Institute published findings that frame the long-term cost with clinical precision. Constant digital consumption is chemically altering adolescent brains by providing dopamine from alternative sources without effort. When the brain senses an abundance of pleasure without effort, it decides there is too much dopamine and begins to produce less. Read that again. Your brain is not just being overstimulated, it is actively reducing its own capacity to produce dopamine naturally. The sunset looks dimmer. The conversation feels flatter. The book cannot hold your attention. Not because those experiences changed, because your baseline shifted, your dopamine floor dropped, and now ordinary life cannot generate enough signal to register as rewarding. This is dopamine receptor downregulation, and it mirrors the exact tolerance pattern seen in substance addiction. The NIH review confirmed it. The dopamine response to addictive stimuli mimics positive prediction errors that never habituate, that never normalize because the signal is never compared against a stable prediction. The brain keeps chasing. The receptors keep retreating. Your phone did not steal your attention. It stole your ability to enjoy anything else. But here is what the Momentous Institute finding also reveals, the part that functions as the exit door. In substance addiction, abstinence for enough time allows the brain to recover its natural ability to achieve homeostasis. The receptors grow back. The baseline resets. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, works in both directions. The same mechanism that built the compulsion loop can dismantle it. The switch can be flipped back, not through willpower. Willpower runs on your prefrontal cortex, the exact structure that chronic phone use has already weakened. You cannot defeat a subcortical compulsion with a cortical override that has been systematically degraded. That is like fighting a fire with a hose that has been cut. The reset requires interrupting the prediction error loop at the source, removing the unpredictable reward, replacing variable reinforcement with fixed, predictable input, giving the dopamine system long enough without artificial surprise signals to recalibrate its baseline downward, to stop expecting the flood, and start responding to ordinary life again. Your brain is not broken. It is running the program that was installed. And every second you understand this mechanism more clearly is a second the program loses its grip. So the question is not whether the switch exists. You now know it does. The question is how many times it has already fired today and whether the hand reaching for your phone right now is yours. The loop is still running. The prediction error is still open. Your dopamine neurons are still calculating. And tomorrow, we decode the protocol behind the 40-millisecond reflex your body uses to override your conscious mind before you even know it happened.